Here's some price for Friday, August 23rd, 2024. We're coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the historic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver, nestled just steps from the shopping on Robson, the dining in Yaletown, the vibrant West End, and every unique side street in between. If you're coming to Vancouver, why don't you stay at the Wall Center? And if you're from this area, reacquaint yourself with downtown at the Wall. Call 604-331-1000. Matt Sekeres alongside Irf Gaffar sitting in for a vacationing Blake Price this week. Big show coming up. And we'll start with our poll question because, wow, it's been quite a week for Vancouver Canucks goaltending. Does the Canucks season hinge on Thatcher Demko's health? Yes or no? You can vote at the Sekeres and Price X and YouTube accounts. How we doing?
I'm great, my friend. How are you?
Been a while since I've seen you. So pleased to be hanging out here today. How's your summer going?
It's going well. Yeah, no, it's going well. It's funny. It's you look outside and you see the weather and it's okay. Well, things are hockey weather is kind of upon us now, Matt.
Yeah, those coolish evenings. They're starting to feel like the season is upon us here as we head to the last week of August. It's been a massive news week for the Vancouver Canucks. We covered the Vasily Podkolzin trade on Monday's program, and since then, all sorts of happenings, including a move with the coaching staff, concerns about Thatcher Demko, and a player signing of an NHL veteran. So we'll get to it all here in this block and more. But first, give me your answer on the poll question, Irf. Does the season hinge on Demko's health?
Well, I put it out on X. I think that this team is a lot better built to withstand a lot more pressure. Like, they don't need elite goaltending to make it to the playoffs, I don't think, nor should they. They should be able to go and beat teams handily and handle their business. I think if they have a 3-1 lead, you're not going to worry about, you can shut it down enough to be able to go and see the game out and things like that. However, when you get to the postseason, Matt, you need elite level goaltending. So for the Canucks and for Thatcher Demko, I think that you take as long as you need to get healthy. You don't rush back. You take this patiently. You do whatever Thatcher Demko needs to do to be healthy, not in December and January. You need him to be healthy when it really matters in March, April, and May.
So I've taken a more, we'll put it this way. If Thatcher Demko misses training camp and preseason and just has a slow start or needs a little bit of time to round into form in October, then I'm not too alarmed by all this. Mm-hmm. But if we go further down the spectrum, could Arturs Silovs and a second goaltender, whether that's Jiri Patera, whether that's Kevin Lankinen, and we'll discuss him here for a little bit, could they keep the Canucks playoff competitive? I just can't get there. So I am voting yes on the poll that the season does hinge on Demko's health, which brings us to our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery, Yellow Dog Spirits, Demko Dread. His rehab is going slowly. The Canucks are concerned. They've been concerned for some time, going back to the draft and free agency, that he may have, in fact, had another procedure this summer, and he may only be ready for the start of the season, not camp or preseason, with the club investigating free agent goaltender Kevin Lankinen, ex of the Nashville Predators, who made $2 million last year. Looks like he overplayed his hand in free agency, but can the Canucks afford him? It is a thunderbolt out of the sky here in late August, particularly coupled with the moves on the coaching staff and the demotion of Ian Clark from director of goaltending to a development coach and a scout, the elevation of Clark's understudy, right-hand man, Marko Torenius from Abbotsford. You tell me, Irf, how predictable was this given all the news we heard around the draft and free agency that the Canucks were on the goaltending market, which was a really big surprise for us on the eve of free agency before Canada Day? Yeah,
look, I think that even before that, Matt, to be completely honest, I think that, in the conversations that they may have had with some of their free agents, I think that their plan was to maybe go out and get a veteran back up again. And when the clock, didn't work for Casey DeSmith. Obviously, he went to Dallas. They still wanted to go and try and find one. And when they didn't, you knew you were going to sign Arturs Silovs. They obviously believe in Arturs Silovs, but this is the reason why they wanted a veteran. This is the reason why. Now, I'm not saying that they knew Thatcher Demko was going to be hurt or what the timeline of his injury may be, but they needed someone. They needed someone to be there to go in and maybe play 35, 40 games or whatever it is, to give Demko a break so he can be healthy. So you mentioned Kevin Lankinen. Obviously, there's other names that may be out there. A team may have to waive a goalie, here during preseason and training camp and all of that. So it's going to be interesting. Are the Canucks going to have to go out and make a move, whether it's a trade to try and get a backup goalie, or is it really going to be, the Artie party? Is he going to be a guy? And the health of Demko is obviously remains in question. Like we said, we don't really know if he's in fact had a procedure or not. He wasn't on the ice for the big CCM event that he's a CCM athlete for in Montreal. I mean, obviously Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews were there, as was he, but he wasn't taking part in any of the on-ice activities. Not entirely sure he's been on the ice that much at all this summer, to be completely honest. So heading into camp, there definitely is a little bit of a concern there, but I think the hope for him is to be ready for the regular season. And if that's the case, then we'll just have to wait and see.
Yellow Dog's Penticton location has opened up the patio, the dog park, a newly renovated outdoor patio that offers tons of space for anyone and everyone to hang out and drink some refreshing brews. It's located in the heart of downtown Penticton, Yellow Dog creating here an inviting and comfortable environment for humans and dogs alike. Yeah, bring your pooch, grab one of your favorite Yellow Dog brews and something to eat from our Hungry Monster food truck. And I was there just that last week and can attest that the drink and the food is fantastic at the dog park in downtown Penticton. So here's the bigger question, Irf. Can Thatcher Demko be trusted to hold up physically anymore? And is there anything the Vancouver Canucks can do about that in the remaining 2 years on his contract? Or is this the die they've cast? Is this how they have to go about the next 2 seasons? Fingers crossed, hoping and praying that Thatcher Demko is that Vezina Trophy finalist that we saw this past season.
I think you have to hope, right? I think his track record kind of speaks for himself when it goes to reputation, right? Because reputation is he's kind of hurt all the time, but when he isn't, he's the Vezina caliber goalie. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword if you're the Vancouver Canucks, where, you have this guy that's so good when he's on, but at some point, there's going to be an injury that takes place. And it's an unfortunate thing to happen. And, it's his health. Is it the knee? Is it the hip? What is it going to be this time? I think that's one of the things that a lot of Canucks fans, are scared of. I think organizationally, they're looking at it and saying, okay, well, we need to try and limit his workload, whether that's practicing, whether that's not playing him in as many games, whether that's, him taking complete days off away from the rink as well, get his mind right and things like that. Because it all goes together in one in trying to win hockey games. So I think for the Canucks, you look at it and say, if he's ready to go and we can get him to be at his absolute best in, let's say, mid-March leading into April. So hopefully we can go on a long playoff run. If we believe that we're that team that can go in a deep playoff run, that's what you have to do. You got to try and give him the time off. You got to try and, let him rest and let him dictate what type of workload that he wants and things like that. Yeah.
When you talk trade, is there any names that pop up for you? You look at the Buffalo Sabres, Luukkonen, Reimer, and Levy are all there. You look at the Carolina Hurricanes, Anderson and Kochetkov are there. Is there any team out there that you sense might have a goaltender who is in play on the trade market? And do you think that would be a better way to go about it than Kevin Lankinen, who I know you have doubts about whether he will sign here in Vancouver?
Well, I mean, like you mentioned, he's going to want at least $2 million. He's going to want a roll, right? He wasn't bad in Nashville when Saros wasn't good. He went in and showed out and showed that he could play at a National Hockey League level. Now, if this is just a stopgap between, Demko being healthy, like we talked about earlier in the show, Matt, where you said if it's just October and you can get him in and play in November and December and he's back to his regular self, then yeah. But if you're going to get a guy and in to be a backup and actually carry a workload, you're going to have to pay him. And I think Lankinen's going to want to come in and have opportunity. Now, for me, you look at goalies, I just said trade because that might only be their option, to be completely honest, if you're not going to want to pay a guy that's, probably going to want what he was making last year. And Lankinen was making $2 million, and that's a lot of money. So it's, do you believe in Silovs? Do you think that he can go and be that guy to weather the storm? And is the health of Demko not as big as what a lot of people are making it out to be from what we know? Obviously, the Canucks and Demko know more, but the reports that have been out there, talking about, he's not 100%, probably not going to be ready for training camp. The start of the regular season is the date. So if you look at that, there is some concern. You have to raise your eyebrows a little bit.
Would you peel a future first-round pick for Yaroslav Askarov, the Nashville goaltender who has said he's not going to report and wants to trade?
I don't think so, because you have your guy in Silovs as well, right? You have a guy that's already there waiting to play. So if you're going to do that, then you might as well, try and see what happens with Demko. You might as well just give him the reins at that point. You're not going to want to mortgage your entire future if you already have it. I mean, this guy's shown that he can go play in the playoffs, play at the highest level. He's going to be playing meaningful hockey here as Latvia tries to, make it to the Olympics in the next little bit. So I would definitely not do that.
I asked just because, that gives you two potential outs if Demko's struggles with staying healthy continue. It allows the cream to rise to the top between the two young goaltenders. Of course, he's cheaper because he's on an entry-level deal as opposed to, say, John Gibson or some of the veterans who might be at play. Anyways, we'll see where this goes with Demko, but needless to say, this is very, very concerning for the Vancouver Canucks because this is yet another season now that looks like Thatcher Demko is not going to be completely healthy from tip to tail. Coupled with that news this week, Ian Clark out as Vancouver Canucks goaltending coach and director of goaltending. Now, apparently, Ian has significant knee and shoulder issues that now will prevent him from going on the ice and coaching and teaching as he normally would. So he'll be a scout, he'll be a developmental coach, and Marko Torenius, his right hand with the Abbotsford Canucks last season, has been elevated. Here is the quote from Patrick Alvin, Canucks general manager. Unfortunately, Ian can no longer go on the ice regularly to do the things that have made him successful, but this new role will fit with his expertise, and having Clarkey going out to find and develop talent will be a big asset to the organization. Fair enough, Irf, but has something been lost here, right? We talked about when Ian Clark returned to the Vancouver Canucks, because you may remember he had a first bid with the Canucks in the Nonis era in the first year of the Gillis regime. But, Ian went off and developed all those fantastic goaltenders in Columbus. And we thought, boy, this is a big competitive advantage for the Canucks to have one of the world's best goaltending coaches in what was, and you've got to hand it to the betting regime on this, a interesting and forward-thinking role, director of goaltending. You're going to work with our NHL guys, but you're going to have oversight over our young guys at the AHL level, at the ECHL level, because, of course, you sometimes have to have a good young prospect playing in the ECHL, not to mention the guys we draft from all across this world. So whether they're playing NCAA hockey, major junior hockey, or European professional hockey. Let me ask you, do you think that Ian Clark is on his way out of the Canucks organization after that? Do you think that other clubs are going to come looking to poach Ian Clark from Vancouver?
I don't think Ian Clark is on his way out imminently. I think that other clubs are definitely going to come and try and talk to Ian Clark and make him their director of goaltending. I think that, without having that label anymore, it gives the opportunity for teams to call him and, offer him the opportunity to go and give him that position. I think that, he's a guy that anyone you talk to when it comes to goaltending, he's in the highest regard of conversations, whether you talk to, GM, scouts, players, goalies, other people around the league and people that follow hockey. It's Ian Clark, the way that he's able to manage goalies, not only their workload on the ice, but the person that they are, how they are away from the game. He really cares about, his people. And I think that that's the biggest thing. I think that he, no matter what happens, he's still definitely going to care a lot about Rick Tocchet. He's definitely going to care a lot about Thatcher Demko and Arturs Silovs and what happens. But you can bet there are going to be some other teams that definitely are going to have interest in Ian Clark's services.
Yeah, and let me say, I got massive respect for Ian Clark and the work that he has done both here in Vancouver and across the National Hockey League. But if you know Ian, he is a taskmaster. He's got an edge to him. He's certainly confident in his ability. I wonder whether any of that rubbed Canucks management the wrong way, because I'm sitting here going, okay, well, he can't get on the ice with the goaltenders anymore, but why would he have to cede his title of director of goaltending? So, I'm sort of wondering here, is he being pushed out? Do they love Torenius enough that they feel they have to make room for him to be an NHL goaltending coach? Patrick Johnston has done some reporting on this in the Province and Post Media. He talked about how Clark recruited Torenius a couple of years ago, that he's a Finn Torenius. If you don't know, he had been working with the St. Petersburg club in the KHL, but resigned his position after Russia's invasion of St. Petersburg, of Ukraine. And Kevin Woodley added that this is not quite a watershed hire, because there have been others, but just the second Finnish goaltending coach in the NHL and just the second European ever to hold a position like this without playing in the National Hockey League. What do you know, if anything, about Torenius?
Not a whole lot, to be honest.
Yeah, we're all learning about Torenius.
We're all learning about him, and I think that you look at it from a Canucks full-on, all-encompassing coaching standpoint. They now have a guy in that coach's room, the goaltending position, that doesn't have any NHL experience.
Yep.
And I think that that's a big thing when you go and look at it. Really, you have the mind of the goaltender and things like that, and the grind of what an NHL season is, and games and nights, and how many games you have, and to plan and do all of that. Their guy just hasn't been there that they currently have. Ian Clark's been there, and he's been the guy for a very, very long time, and he understands, what the rigors of an NHL schedule is. So to have a guy with no experience, I understand you want to promote him, and he's done a very good job, and he's earned his stripes to get up here and get the call up to the NHL. It's just a guy that doesn't really have that experience. So it's going to be tough on two ends.
You're always looking to promote good young people, and if Torenius is a good young coach that you think factors into your future, I completely understand it. I also do wonder, when you juxtapose this move against Jim Rutherford's comments from earlier in the summer with our friend John Shannon on the Bob McCowan podcast, that Demko had to go about changing up his routine and building a little bit more rest and recovery between his on-ice sessions, not being out there as much, working so hard as a means of preserving the body and making sure he's good to go for the long haul. I do wonder whether Clark and the Canucks front office with Rutherford and Alvin weren't able to get on the same page there. And that's another reason why we saw the move made this week on the coaching staff, because everybody will attest that it is an awfully odd time to be making changes to the coaching staff. This is something that you want done, well, in an ideal world, prior to the draft and free agency, if you have the time, if you're not playing in the Stanley Cup final, as the Canucks weren't. As mentioned, a thunderbolt out of the sky here on the goaltending side of things this week. And of course, Rick Dhaliwal doing some of the reporting there on the Demko side of things. Now, as you mentioned, Demko is going to be on the ice next week. Noah Strang of the Daily Hive tweeting August 29th, Latvia is in a pool with France, Slovenia, and Ukraine to earn a spot in the men's ice hockey tournament at the Milan Olympics 2026. Noah also adds, Arturs Silovs, a former MVP of the Men's World Hockey Championships. You'll remember a year ago when he led Latvia to that bronze medal, a massive underdog story. Noah reports he's never had a save percentage below .915 in an international competition. So this could be a very good little springboard for Silovs.
100%, especially if they qualify. That guy's going to have not only all the confidence in the world of what he did in the NHL postseason for his team, but going to represent your country again, and he loves doing that, but qualifying for the Olympics, I mean, that would be huge for him. That would be
Absolutely.
reap all sorts of benefits from that.
And you would think he would be ticketed to be an Olympian in a couple of years if he qualifies. So I think this is very good news for the Canucks. More often than not, you sort of hold your breath a little bit when club players are playing in international tournaments, particularly at different times of year, because there's always the risk of injury. And that's very much the case here as well. But I think in this specific case, particularly if Arturs Silovs has to carry a greater workload and be the guy ready to start the season, I think this is a very nice little tune-up and could very well work in the Canucks and Silovs' favor. Now, something else we were kicking around here, Irf. Well, you tell me, when they were poking around goaltenders prior to free agency and didn't wind up getting one, and we'll have the discussion here in a second, were they a little foolhardy in going out and signing all the skaters they did when they knew this was a possibility? But when they were poking around goaltenders around free agency, was the plan then to start Silovs in the minors, bring in another NHL experienced goaltender with Demko, let Silovs play in Abbotsford as the starter, and then bring him up should Demko's health fail, should the backup goaltender not be able to carry the mail? Was that your understanding of where they were at in free agency?
Yeah, once the season ended, to be completely
honest. So could that
honest.
still be a thing here if they go out and add a goaltender?
It depends how quality the goaltender is if they go out and add. I mean, let's just use Lankinen for an example, because he's the guy that everyone seems to be talking about right now. Okay, so he's going to probably want a little bit of a raise from his $2 million that he's been making. He's going to want to play, and he's going to probably want to play a lot. So if you're going to do a tandem of Demko / Lankinen, or Lankinen Silovs, if Demko's not ready to go to start the year, then how many games are you really going to give him? Or is it going to be that split of where, Demko's probably going to get the brunt of the work, but it's only 60% of it, and then it's Lankinen, and then you have Silovs playing all the games in Abbotsford and being the guy and getting those meaningful reps. I mean, he's played in the most pressure situations you could possibly play in as a young athlete for him, to be completely honest.
The medal round of the Men's World Cup and the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I mean, that is pretty big-time hockey for a guy this young.
Yeah, exactly. So the way that I see it is, if they're able to go out and add one, yes, but I think they've come around to being comfortable right now, knowing that Demko might not be out for that long, and that they can survive with, Silovs doing the work, and, Demko eventually coming back at some point to full form.
DeBrusk, Heinen, re-signed Teddy Bluger, re-signed Dakota Joshua, Sherwood, Sprong, and then the defenseman, Desharnais, Forbert. Were they foolhardy going out and signing all these skaters when they knew they had a potential goaltending matter?
I don't think so, because that team makes you better no matter who's in net, right? Whether it's Demko, whether it's Silovs, or whether it's anybody else, that team in front of him is so much better that you don't need elite level goaltending. Like, that team should be able to take you to the playoffs. Jake DeBrusk is a guy that they needed to be on Elias Pettersson's wing. He's not going to have Ilya Mikheyev there anymore. It's going to be a guy that can put the puck in the net. A guy like Daniel Sprong, who scores in the National Hockey League, who's proven that he can score goals. Dan Heinen, I think, is the most underrated of all the signings. I think that's the guy that everyone's going to go and say, wow, we are really happy that we made that move. And I think that there is another move maybe on defense. I think they want to shore up that blue line, get another puck mover, but these are moves that you needed to make. And I think that, they'll look at it and say it was a job well done. If they were able to go out and get a goalie, that'd be icing on top. I don't think that they were foolish, because I think that the moves that they made their team better no matter who was in net.
You mentioned a guy like Lankinen wanting a couple of million, and it does look like he's overplayed his hand a little bit in free agency.
For sure.
He's still out there. But let me throw this in your pipe. We know Nils Höglander is not particularly Rick Tockett's cup of tea. You have signed all these wingers, including Daniel Sprong, who may very well fit on that line with Pettersson and DeBrusk. If you do need to open up cap space and go out there and make a trade for a pedigreed National Hockey League goaltender, is a Nils Höglander as trade chip? Is that something that makes sense to you, or is he just too valuable, the goals per dollar that he adds to the Vancouver Canucks season?
I think he's still valuable, but he's an asset, right? You look at everyone else on that team. You got rid of I don't know if Podkolzin was an asset, but you got something back for him rather than risking him and losing him to waivers for nothing. So, Podkolzin's the one that's an interesting one because, you look at Daily Faceoff, they have their lines there. He's on the top line with JT Miller, right? Projected to go and start the season on the Canucks top line. It's the defensive game. I know it's, he's not a Rick Tocchet guy. We've seen that before. He was healthy scratched, in the playoffs. Is he a guy that is young enough where he went and listened to what his coaches and what management said that what he needed to do to come back and be an impact player every single night, both offensively and defensively? We know he can score. He scored 24 goals all at even strength. So I think that he's a pretty good hockey player in that sense, but it's the other side of his game where he needed the work and to be trusted. Are you willing to give up on that? And I don't think that you're going to, just for the sake of having a goalie that maybe only plays half the games.
Well, more Canucks news this week. The signing of winger Sammy Blais, a contract with the Abbotsford Canucks, but invited to Canucks training camp on a PTO. Now, I'm not sure Blais is somebody who would figure as a significant piece in a trade for a player like Pavel Buchnevich, as the New York Rangers once did in acquiring him from the Blues and shipping Buchnevich to St. Louis. Wound up back in St. Louis last year. In fact, the season previous, has never scored more than 25 points and 9 goals in an NHL season, but does have some bite. He is a noticeable player out there, a shift disturber, a forechecker. He brings some size at 6'2" and 206 pounds. What do you make of the signing here? And is this effectively Vasily Podkolzin replacement as somebody who would be there with Di Giuseppe and Oman looking to be the 13th forward?
I think I think he might end up being the 13th forward out of camp, Matt. I think that he's a guy that, he played for the Hartford Wolfpack. It was the last time he was in the American Hockey League, and he played 5 games there in 22-23. I think that after that, 31 games with the Blues and 53 last season, he's an NHL player. So you give him an AHL contract right now, and you kind of wait and see what happens in training camp, and then maybe they can kind of figure things out and maneuver what they need to do in order to give him an NHL deal, right? I can't see a situation where, he's a guy that is going to start the season in Abbotsford, I think, or on the farm. Before that, he would need a contract. He needs a contract, but I think that they're in position to give him one. Like before that, 40 games with the Rangers, 36 with the Blues, 40 games with the Blues. He was never not an NHL player, really. So I think that when you're doing that, you go and look at it, and he's another guy, like you mentioned, adds some bite, adds a different element to this lineup. And also, if you think that Heinen can be a guy that plays in that top 6, if Höglander can't, and Blais the guy that you want to bring in for that 4th line, Höglander might be a guy that finds himself upstairs a little bit if he doesn't, if he's not a guy that can play on that 4th line.
Yeah, Blais very much sounds like a Tocchet style of player here, and I think may even have a little bit more to give than Phil Di Giuseppe, although we'll see how he handles the defensive side of the puck, because, of course, that's one of the reasons that Di Giuseppe endeared himself to Tocchet last year, of course, in training camp, and then through the first, 8 games of the season. We were talking a lot about Di Giuseppe for the spade work that he did in going out and retrieving pucks for more talented line mates. So he played up the lineup. I'm not sure Blais has that kind of upside, but I thought this was a very good move for the Canucks because it costs you effectively nothing.
Yeah.
And you have an NHL pedigreed player, a guy who has played 257 NHL regular season games, 27 playoff games as well. So you're talking about a guy who's upwards of 280 NHL games that you can call on in reserve. Our old friend Roberto Luongo. And as I saw the events this week Roberto's day with the cup, I couldn't help think what we would have, the attention this would have gotten, the way we would have followed it, what we would have said if they had won Game 7 in 2011, and it was Roberto Luongo player day with the cup, Vancouver Canuck first ever Stanley Cup. And of course, all the hijinks that would have accompanied that, because that was back in the Strombone 1 days, right? Where he didn't have to be this button-down NHL executive. Not that he is. He was at the WWE show in South Florida. But if you missed it, Roberto took the cup back to his hometown of Montreal. He and the family ate gnocchi poutine out of the cup. Apparently that's the specialty at his brother's Montreal restaurant. He had already eaten pasta out of the cup with his wife's family, who owned a restaurant down in South Florida. And he also strapped on the pads.
Yeah.
And we know he hasn't done a whole lot of that since retirement. He strapped on the pads in true Roberto form. It was him and his friends versus his brother and his brother's friends in a pickup game for the Stanley Cup. You know, the competitive juices burn with number one.
Yeah, of course. And I think that it was awesome to see.
It was
really great to see. I mean, eating the poutine, the gnocchi poutine out of the cup was something that Roberto Luongo did. The videos were awesome because he's like, I think someone was filming. He's like, have you tried this yet? Because people were like, what is going on? He's like, no. He's like, no, you got to try this stuff. It's unbelievable. So good for him. I mean, honestly, I think that brings a smile to a lot of faces of Vancouver Canuck fans. It really does. And like you just mentioned, it would have been a lot different had, number one, the player, been able to go and do that and not been the executive. Yeah. But I think that a lot of people here in these parts hold a really soft spot for Roberto Luongo. Sure. So definitely it was fun to watch.
For sure. Brought a big smile to my face. Yeah. Now, of all the different applications of artificial intelligence, Irf, I got to admit, I did not see this one coming. From our friends at the Daily Hive, artificial intelligence has determined the Canucks have the NHL's most attractive players. They are the best-looking team in the NHL, according to AI. An average attractiveness score of 7.841 out of 10. Now, here's the methodology. A sports gaming company obtained 1,079 images of NHL players from assorted sites, ran them through a, quote, attractiveness tests AI function to assign a score between 1 and 10. Now, they didn't assign, or at least they didn't release, the attractiveness scores of every single NHL player, but they did release the attractiveness score of the leader on every NHL team. Did you see this story?
I did.
Do you see who was ranked as most attractive Vancouver Canuck?
Was it the Swede?
You would have thought it's the Flow, right? Besser, the young Robert Redford lookalike. It's Nils Aman, 9.33.
Do they know he doesn't play much?
I'm not sure it matters.
When I saw this before, I thought it was AI. I was wondering if the survey was conducted at restaurants in Yaletown.
Yes,
from certain members of staff.
Take a straw poll.
Yes, 100%. That's what I thought it was done, but clearly not. And clearly AI thinks something different.
Well, maybe Nils Aman has a magazine cover in his future. And speaking of cover boys, EA Sports NHL 25 features the Hughes brothers on the cover. As they put it, three brothers, one unforgettable cover. Quinn, Jack, Luke, all together there on the cover of this legendary video game. Are you a player?
I was for a while, for a really long time. I haven't been in the past few years. Obviously, the technology is a lot different, and I would get smoked playing now probably.
Ditto. I can't keep up anymore. Too many buttons, too many levers. I'm not that dexterous.
Yeah, I'm way better on the betting apps than I am playing games.
Yeah, like 90, whatever, 2, 3 through 97, 98, 99, like that NHL game. I played it a lot.
I think I was like 04, 05, and then a little bit of 06, 07, then I was done. But the cool thing about that cover is if the wide shot of it, EA actually gave Quinn's father and Quinn's mother a stall in the photo as well. So not only the three are in it, the two parents are in it as well. So I thought that was a nice touch as well.
Jim, of course, being a former player and coach and scout himself. Now, if you're unfamiliar, this is real estate that typically goes to one of the NHL's biggest stars, oftentimes to a young up-and-coming player too, right? Well, I shouldn't say young up-and-coming, an established young star. There are some who are disputing Luke Hughes being on this cover.
But that's the thing. The other two, like, I mean, if you're going to put those two on it, you're going to put the other brother for sure. It's almost a guarantee. I mean, look, 92-point Norris winning trophy defenseman. Jack Hughes is Jack Hughes. He's one of the elite level goal scorers and playmakers in the NHL. And Luke is only going to get better. So why not? I mean, Luke's bragging rights.
Luke was on the all-rookie team last year. I mean, I believe he finished third to Bedard and to Brock Faber on the Calder Trophy vote.
But Luke's going to be up there. I mean, he's going to be a star in this league too in his own right. So I think that, I mean, if you have an opportunity to do it, you're going to do it, Matt. You're going to put all three of them on the cover.
No question. Yeah, no, I think that's, if not the first, one of the early of many, I think, collaborations that you're going to see between different brands out there. And the Hughes brothers, I think they will ascend to being the first family of hockey here, the first family of the NHL, if they're not already there. After we signed off the show on Monday, we finally got a Patrik Laine trade. Laine going from the Columbus Blue Jackets along with a second-round pick for defenseman Jordan Harris, right shot defenseman Jordan Harris. And I got to say, Irf, I think this is a trade that could be awesome for both teams. Columbus, first of all, gets the entirety of Laine's salary off the books this year and next, and that was a huge surprise to people. Many thought they would have to retain salary on the player, given all the unknowns here. They get a cheap right shot defenseman who has played a couple of years here in the National Hockey League. Now, he hasn't scored a whole lot. The offense may never come, but at the very least, you're getting a serviceable young right-handed defenseman. In the case of the Montreal Canadiens, first of all, they have always loved that player that has flair and panache, that goal-scoring winger, whether it was the Rocket, whether it was Guy Lafleur. There have been some others over the years. So he very much fits the brand and the typecast of what the Montreal Canadiens have delivered to their fans over the year. Look, they don't anticipate being good this season. Kent Hughes is already their general manager, sort of tamped down expectations for this coming year. So if Laine doesn't work out, the worst thing that they've got, okay, so this year they're probably punting on anyways. And they got a bit of a cap issue next year with them, but they get a second-round pick for their troubles there. And if Laine does work out, if he is able to recapture, forget 50 goal form, but just 30 goal form.
I think he's going to score 30.
I think 35. You've got a contributing player here who inches the Canadiens closer to a playoff spot and maybe makes it a competitive season for them if their other young guys are able to grow up.
Well, I mean, right now, you play him with Alex Newhook and Kirby Dach. Like, that's a pretty good line. I think he's a guy that can score 40 again at some point. But like that, like just looking like the top power play unit for the Montreal Canadiens, Laine, Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Cole Caulfield, and Lane Hudson. That's pretty good. That is a pretty good top power play unit.
If you don't know the name Lane Hudson,
you should.
Defenseman with the Boston University Terriers. He was the guy who kept Tom Wielander from playing power play 1 last year.
Yep.
A dynamic offensive defenseman, had an absolutely extraordinary year in NCAA hockey and would right now go way higher than the second round pick that he went for a couple of years ago in the NHL draft. So yeah, hey, very rarely do we see hockey trades that could help both teams. This is an example of a hockey trade, I think, that could help both teams. We also saw another trade this week, and a sizable one at that. The Winnipeg Jets finally relieving themselves of American forward Rutger McGroarty. He was the 14th pick in the 2022 NHL entry draft. They send him to Pittsburgh for Western Hockey League forward Braden Yeager, who was the 14th pick in the 2023 draft. McGroarty basically said no to Winnipeg. And the Penguins pounced, and they've signed him to a contract, and he could very well be a Penguin this year, whereas the Jets are going to have to wait on Yeager a little bit. What's your sense of this deal and the way Kevin Cheveldayoff handled yet another guy who didn't want to be in the Manitoba Capital?
Yeah, I think it was more Rutger saying ridding himself of Winnipeg than it was them of him. I mean, what was the report when it was out there saying that he put the jersey on in dev camp and he said that it didn't feel right or something like that, put the Winnipeg jersey on. He said it didn't feel right. Look, I forced his way out, but I mean, good for Cheveldayoff. He got a player that can come back and, he's going to play and he's going to play meaningful minutes and he's going to hopefully help the Jets get to the next level where they need to go. For McGroarty, he's going to go to Pittsburgh and play with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. So it's a pretty good situation for him for sure. But what Cheveldayoff was able to get back in a place that is now proving very difficult to get players to want to come and play and want to stay. That's the difficult part. I mean, you're going to pay, we talk about taxes in certain states, in certain cities. Winnipeg is going to have to start paying the Winnipeg tax now to their players.
Yeah, well, in some cases they have already. They still have Cole Perfetti out there as a restricted free agent. Of course, there was a lot of talk about Nikolai Ehlers, the fine scoring winger they have going in the final year of his contract and maybe being on the blocks. So Winnipeg, an interesting team to look at here in what's left of the summer and going into camp and preseason, because I'm not sure Cheveldayoff is done there yet. Now, our old friend Ryan Johansen of Port Moody. So he gets traded to the Philadelphia Flyers last year. And this week, the Flyers announce that they are terminating Johansen's contract due to a material breach. Agent Kurt Overhard, and of course we have long known Kurt and former agent to Ryan Kesser, Kevin Bieksa, Brendan Morrison. There have been a number of Canucks that Overhard has represented over the years, not to mention some British Columbians like Kyle Turris as well. Kurt Overhard putting out a statement saying the player and he are very disappointed that this has taken place. It sounds very much like the NHLPA is going to grieve this. And did you see, and Johansen set to make $4 million this year in the final year of his deal. He's 32 years old now and is no longer the player that he once was in Columbus and Nashville. So Philly trying to get off the hook for this $4 million and the NHLPA having 60 days to grieve this. Internet sleuths have pointed out that Johansen got married this summer, and there are pictures and videos on social media showing him lifting up his bride and regaling at the wedding, and that maybe this is the smoking gun that the Flyers are going to stake their case on in front of an arbitrator. Very hard typically to get out of these contracts. What's your sense of where this is going?
I don't know. I think we've always known that Ryan Johansen was going to eventually have some sort of surgery, whether it was in the hip or the back. It's always been an issue with him for years.
Yep.
I think that was always the case. I think he was just waiting for more than a time to do it. I mean, we've
also known that Ryan enjoys himself a good party. We've known that from way back when he was a young player coming up here through Port Moody.
100%. But
his NHL days.
Look, I think his severe hockey injury requires extensive surgery. It's been scheduled. Since being traded to the Flyers, Ryan has worked in good faith with the club, medical staff, and authorized third-party physicians. So I think that when it goes to the NHLPA and they file grievances, the PA is going to go to bat for their players. And I think the Philadelphia Flyers, if they think they have something, it better be good.
It better be a lock stock because
than what they think they have from their internet sleuths in Philly.
Well, again, we don't know that is what we don't know that's what they're going to pin their case on, but the internet is undefeated, and some fans went out there and went, "Oh, look at this! He got married. Oh, look at that! He's lifting his bride.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that! All these players carrying on, including Ryan, at his wedding." Matty Beniers is now a rich man down the I-5 in Seattle. A 7-year deal paying him more than $7.1 million per year. It buys out 2 years of unrestricted free agency. Do you like this idea of players with a small sample size, extending them long-term, buying out UFA years? And did the Kraken need to do something like this? Because let's face it, it's not like they've switched on the market down there in Seattle. And it is a competitive, of course, market for the sporting eyeball and the sporting dollar with the Seahawks and UW football and the Mariners and everything else going on down there.
I mean, good for Beniers, but another place that you're only paying federal taxes in Washington State, right?
That's right.
So I think
they're one of the tax-free jurisdictions.
Beniers has got paid, and I think he's very happy to take that. Like small sample size, it's one of those things. But what does this do for a guy like Brock Besser? That was my immediate take at how much Beniers got, how much Besser is now going to command in that. But a lot of players are starting to do it now. You know, if you think you have half of a good season or whatever, and a team's willing to throw a certain amount of money at you, how can you say no to it at some point, right? There are certain players that know that they can say no because of what they know they're capable of, but there are other players where it's like, okay, I know I'm going to be a good player in the National Hockey League. I might be a bad player for a couple of years, but if I'm going to be getting paid 7.14 for the next 8, I'm taking it. Or 7, I'm taking that all day.
Yeah, and he's got to turn out to be everything that the Seattle Kraken hope he can be, because
the kid,
it is, look, needless to say, Seattle had a rougher expansion go than Vegas did. I mean, GMs did not play as fast and free with that expansion draft as they did with the Vegas Golden Knights expansion draft, much to the benefit of George McPhee, Kelly McCrimmon, and the Vegas Golden Knights outfit. And you say the Besser, look, it is clear, and I think the Vancouver Canucks are absolutely right. With Brock's injury history, let's see what you do for an encore here following up the 40 goals. If, in fact, it looks, particularly by Christmas time, Irf, that Besser is sitting on another 40-goal year or even a 30, 35-goal year, I would suspect at that point the Canucks look to get him signed and know that they're going to pay the piper. But I think they have to guard against another big injury there. I think they have to guard against Besser crashing back down to earth, because let's face it, there was a couple of years there where Brock was not maximizing potential. I think that's a right move from Rutherford and Alvin, taking their time on the Besser extension as opposed to rushing off and negotiating off a 40-goal year.
No, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
I think that even probably both. I mean, look, I think from Brock's standpoint, if the Canucks come and offer him a contract that he likes, and they're obviously going to not play ball, it's going to be low as it usually is. And he's going to try and go and, be in that top 6, be on that top unit power play, be a guy that at worst is going to play with Elias Pettersson, if not JT Miller. He's going to be there. So you have your opportunity to go. I think 30 at least is the benchmark for him now, right? I think that we have to go and say that. So if he can follow up a 40-goal season with a 30-goal season, that's a lot of money coming his way.
Yeah, and deservedly so.
Yeah.
There are still 21 restricted free agents needing contracts.
It's crazy.
That might be slightly out of date because I'm not sure what's happened here over the last couple of hours. And some pretty significant names out there as well. We mentioned Perfetti in Winnipeg. You're also looking at Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider in Detroit. Thomas Harley, who grew into a role with the Dallas Stars this past year. Jeremy Swayman in Boston, their goaltender. But I want to ask you about Seth Jarvis in Carolina, because we've heard some smoke about the Canucks interested in Jarvis. And look, right now, it's a little bit pie in the sky because all the cap space has been committed. So it's effectively dollar in, dollar out, not to mention this added complication and layer with the goaltending market. But What do you think? What's the holdup there with Jarvis in Carolina? And the longer this goes, is there a potential for a trade of Jarvis?
I think the holdup is the owner not wanting to pay the player yet. To be completely honest, in Carolina, I think that it's been no secret that.
And Dundon is very strict and methodical with the way he doles out cap space and dollars.
Exactly. So I think that I don't think it's a secret that that's what the holdup is. I think that if Seth Jarvis, if there was an offer presented to Seth Jarvis that he liked from Carolina, he'd probably have signed it by now. He had 33 goals last season, Matt, for that team. The team's success, maybe not as high as that they all wanted it to be, but if a team like we're going to go and make a move for a guy like Seth Jarvis, the asking price would be very high.
That's a very big.
The asking price would be very high.
That's Höglander in a first round pick, sort of. Yeah. That sort of compensation.
The asking price is going to be very high.
Yeah.
82 games 2 seasons ago, 81 last year, 68 his first year.
And he kills penalties too. Yep. Like he's an all situations winger, which is, for me, I've always said, if you're going to go out and pay a winger, either go out and pay the winger that just scores at an unbelievable rate, is that elite natural goal scorer, or the guy who scores at, a tier below that level, but is also a playmaker, an elite offensive player, or go get the all situations guy.
Yeah.
The guy who kills penalties, the guy who's playing in the last 2 minutes when you're defending a 1-goal lead. And Jarvis has a lot of those qualities.
Yeah. And the guy was a career plus 44 in only 231 games.
Oh yeah. And he's young enough that you can sit there and dare to dream. I mean, the best could very well be yet to come. And that could be a pretty awesome best when he's a fully mature player. Let's get to today's menu. It's brought to you by Greta. Greta, a great spot to catch the game throughout the season. Quick walk to the Rinker Stadium, go-to spot for food, drink, and fun. That arcade before and after the game. Make it a game night at Greta, 50 West Cordova, or at gretabar.com. We got Frank Corrado coming up next, if I'm not mistaken. Frank Corrado's going to come up next, former Vancouver Canucks defenseman. And, of course, TSN hockey analyst on all the Vancouver Canucks topics that we've tackled here over the last 45 minutes or so. Harmon Dial also going to join us. Harm, of course, from Canucks Conversation with David Quadrelli. And this fellow's going to be sitting in for Quads next week. And, of course, The Athletic, again, on all these juicy Canucks news items that have fallen into our lap this week with Thatcher Demko and his health, and what that means for Arturs Silovs, what that means for even Jiri Patera on the goaltending market, potentially for Lankinen, the changes in the coaching staff and the structure with Ian Clark, the Podkolzin trade, lest we forget, Vasily was traded this week, former or one-time top 10 pick for the Canucks, and the signing of Sammy Blais. So all of that is coming up on the program today. It's time now for our Bet365 Bets of the Day. This segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres and Price. Irf, where are you going today, buddy? What sport and who you like?
Going to the Diamond. Going to the Diamond. I think you know which way I'm going. To the New York Yankees. Going to go to Yankee Stadium. I'm not taking Aaron Judge, though, even though I probably should take Aaron Judge to hit a home run.
Judge to hit a home run's a pretty good bet every day of the week.
It's plus 170. I'm going Juan Soto. Juan Soto, he went a little quiet after that after the 3 home run bombs that he had. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to go Juan Soto anytime home run at plus 350. $25, Matt, returns you 300 if Juan Soto, or sorry, not 300. My bad. $25 returns you 112 on a Juan Soto home run.
And with all due respect to Ohtani and Trout when he's healthy, and some of the other bats are around the way, Bobby Witt's having an incredible season in Kansas City. But for me, Judge and Soto are the 2 best hitters in the game.
They literally are. Statistically, they are too.
Well, the other thing about Soto, which I absolutely loved when he was with Washington and then to San Diego, and I got to admit, love it less now as a Yankee because, gosh, those damn Yankees. But he's an incredibly patient hitter. That is a professional hitter. That is not just a big, strong guy that can muscle the ball over the fence. That is the full package right there in terms of how to hit a baseball, not just for power, but the contact skills, the bat to ball skills, the patience and eye, the walks he takes. Complete hitter. Just love. And I love the little, histrionics he's got with the digging in and the Brahma Bull stuff. I love the flavor that he brings to the batter's box as well.
Did you see the video of him in the batter's box doing that and the Canadian Little League team in behind the dugout? And they're obviously the Surrey kids, kids from Surrey.
Yeah.
They're in behind him, and everyone, it was in slow-mo. It's an incredible replay, and everyone's just looking at him. All the kids just jaws dropped.
Judge and Soto, I would imagine the off after when those little leaguers saw him, especially with the size of them. I mean, Aaron Judge could be playing defensive end in the NFL.
First time I saw Aaron Judge, I was like, holy crap.
Yeah. College football starts this Saturday with a week 0 game from Dublin, Ireland, of all places. Florida State and Georgia Tech. Florida State lost loads of players from last year's undefeated team that got screwed out of the playoff berth. Tech actually returns a decent number of stars, including a quarterback. They played very good football down the stretch last year. They put a scare into mighty Georgia. So I'm going to take the 10.5 points with Georgia Tech, and I'm going to make a small bet on the money line as well at plus 350 on the upset. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS when opening that account. Frank Corrado coming up next.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Sekeres and Price from the historic Wall Center, and very pleased to be joined by former Vancouver Canuck and TSN hockey analyst, Mr. Frank Corrado. Frank.
What a pleasure. What's going on, boys? Nice to see Irf. Hey, looking good, buddy.
Hey, my friend.
Well, in Canucks land this week, Frankie, with Thatcher Demko, the Canucks concerned about his rehab. The report from Rick Dhaliwal, he might not be ready for the start of camp or preseason. They might be targeting a regular season start for Demko, and they're checking in on the goalie market, including Kevin Lankinen, ex of the Nashville Predators. First and foremost, how concerned would you be if Demko does miss all of camp and preseason?
I would be fairly concerned. You never want to miss training camp. And when it comes to having an injury, leading up to the season, something that's nagging you going into the season, it feels like you're always chasing it. And that's not something that I want for my starting goaltender. So there has to be a fairly significant level of concern. Also, given the fact that he couldn't finish in the playoffs, and now he's had basically all summer to rest, rehabilitate, strengthen. And I can guarantee you the athlete himself, he would have used all that time to the best of his capabilities. Like, I don't think he just went away, sat on a beach for a month and said, oh, now I'm going to start addressing things. Like, he would have been addressing things from day one, as soon as his offseason started. So you go through all this time and it's still not ready. Like, that has to be fairly significant and fairly concerning. And obviously I'm not privy to, the nature of it, but just, as someone who's kind of been through the whole injury process like a million times and always had to rehab things in the summer, it's generally not great news when you're not ready for the start of the season the start of training camp.
Yeah, I think that, there's been reports out there that there may have been a procedure. No one can really confirm it. We won't know, I guess, until training camp when the Canucks eventually do speak, Frankie. But having said all of that about Thatcher Demko, moving forward, if you're the Vancouver Canucks, Matt just mentioned, they're in the market for a goaltender. From what you've seen in that short little window of what they got from Arturs Silovs, what do you make of him possibly having to come in and be that guy, start training camp and maybe even the regular season?
Well, he could play well, Irf, but he can't be Thatcher Demko, or he can't be with Jacob Markstrom. And, that's like is that a 60-game guy? Like, you can't put those kinds of expectations on him. You can't ask him to do that right away. Like, if everything went well for Silovs this year, he was going to be, a backup to a, tandem type goaltender. What is the math on that? It's somewhere between 25 to 35 starts? Like, that's So now you can't just say, well, Demko's out, we're going to need you to for 50. Like he's probably not ready for that yet. And hey, you know what? If he plays well and he catches fire, that's awesome. All the power to him. Like they've obviously invested a lot in him, and he's played well last year in the playoffs. He played well at the Men's Worlds, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think you can spring him into that situation and say, go be Demko for us. So they absolutely do need to make some kind of move if Demko is not going to be ready, in order to help kind of ease the kid along, because you don't want to put him in a situation where you tarnish his confidence and then he's working to find things. Like there's no guarantee that he can step in and do what Demko does. And, realistically, there's not many goaltenders around the league that can play the way Demko does and handle that workload.
So what do you know about Kevin?
So, I mean, I think what I remember about Lankinen is last year when UC Saros was playing just okay, for that stretch of time, Lankinen was playing pretty well in Nashville. And Saros obviously was able to find his form, but there were times, I think, last year in Nashville where Lankinen kept that team in games, and I think that's all you can ask for from a guy like that. And, he probably is in the same category as a number of goalies around the league, like that make, I don't know, between 2 and 3 million, that are not good enough to be 1A starters, but are good enough to be in a tandem situation. And that's him. Like I'm kind of surprised that we're sitting here at this point in the season and he's not signed, because I think there's some goalies that got signed early on in free agency where I would probably take Kevin Lankinen, who's a little bit younger and, kind of showed something last year in Nashville. So I think it would be, for Lankinen, it would be more than just a third guy that goes down to Abbotsford. Like I think he's an NHL goalie. So if you do bring him in, it's not like you're force feeding someone who has no business being an NHL net. Like he's a very capable goalie, and he showed that last year in Nashville.
All of this is happening with the specter of the Canucks changing goaltending coaches. Ian Clark, no longer the director of goaltending. He'll stay with the organization to scout and help on the developmental side, but a new goaltending coach, and this comes just weeks after Jim Rutherford had talked about how Demko has to change up his routine between starts. Now, nobody doubts that Clark has issues that are preventing him from now getting on the ice and actually being that, in your face teacher. But I'd like your take on what putting these two situations together in terms of the Canucks changing goaltending coaches while Demko is maybe a question mark for the start of the season.
It is interesting for sure, and you guys must talk about it all the time. But if you talk to anyone from the goalie brigade, whether it's Noodles or Marty Biron or Kevin Weeks, any of these guys, like Ian Clark, is held in very high regard from the goalie brigade, and I think there's a lot of teams that would have liked to have his services over the years, and Vancouver was very fortunate to have him at the helm, and we've kind of gotten to see his handiwork, whether it's been with Markstrom or been with Demko or even, working with Silovs now. When it comes to like the comments about changing, changing the way the workload is or the, that kind of stuff, I'm kind of in agreement there, Matt, to be honest with you. Like I've seen the way these goalies are on the ice so much before practice. They're on after practice. Every morning skate, they got to be on there. And here's the thing, like the goalies aren't doing the Marty Brodeur 70 games a year anymore. Like that's just not happening, right? So if a goalie plays 60 games a year, it's a mass, like that's a huge workload for him, but they're injured a lot. And, the hips are a thing and the groins are a thing and there's nagging injuries. And it's like, so if guys are playing less games and we're going with these tandems more often, why are guys dealing with these nagging injuries? Well, I have a feeling it's because, ahead of an 11 o'clock practice, The goalie's got to be out there doing stuff at 10:30 or 10:45. Then they got to do the practice. Then they got to stay out after for work. And then every morning skate, they want to get out there because they want to feel their pads, the skates, the glove, all this kind of stuff. Like it is a lot. And then you add in the off ice element where, they got to be in the gym, lifting and stretching and, the plane rides and all that kind of stuff. Like it really does add up. I guess, the moral of the story is if the goalies are playing less than ever, they shouldn't be hurt more than ever. And I think, I don't like that's anecdotal. I'm sure someone could fact check that and say, well, actually goalies are playing this and that. It's like, okay, but I'm just saying in this situation, probably the goaltender might have to change the way he does things. And it might not just be, the normal way goalies do things, because that seems to have gotten him to a point where now he's not ready for the regular season or not ready for training camp.
I think one of those things when you look at it is goalie coaches and, goalie consultants and guys that work with goalies, like for so long, their preparation has been a lot of it kind of on the ice. So say you're a goalie coach, and we'll obviously use here as an example, but that's all Demko's known, right? Is his workload. And that's how he prepares himself. And that's how he gets ready for the game and the season. So if I understand what Jim Rutherford's saying, he's got to get him off the ice and things like that. But how much do you do that? And how much do you have to go to the player and be like, well, listen, like we understand this part of your routine, but you just can't do it anymore.
Well, I think the other thing that you need to kind of point out is players have to be trained to a certain resistance level. Like you can't just baby your way through things and expect your body to hold up in the toughest, most rigorous of situations. Like I think that's the balance that you always have to find as a player, as an athlete, where you need to exert yourself, you need to push through some stuff, because you need to be able to handle it when it's difficult and it's hard, and the arena's hot and you're facing a ton of shots, and you have to be able to know that you've handled that kind of resistance, because if you haven't done that, that's when your body's going to break down. But we can't have your body break down in the trading leading up to it. You know what I mean? So that's where both arguments are gonna kind of come to the forefront. It's a fine line. Really, what it comes down to is work backwards from this. How is the goaltender his best in the game? Because nothing else really matters. How is the athlete at his best during the game? If the guy only needs to practice, on a weird schedule, or maybe he doesn't even need to do practice. Maybe he just does the 30 minutes or the 15 minutes before practice, and that's all he needs. And then he does his morning skate, and he's not out there taking shots, doing, I don't know, power play practice. Like he might not need it. It might be weird. It might be unorthodox, but work backwards from what gives our player the best chance to succeed, and do all the steps that you need according to that. And, it might be weird, but that might be the best course of action here. It might have to be something that's out of the box.
Vasily Podkolzin is an Edmonton Oiler from earlier in the week, Frank. The Canucks get a 4th-round pick back, but they give their chief rival, a one-time top 10 pick, who clearly had an uphill battle here to make the opening night 12 forwards, albeit he may have been just an injury or two away from being in there. What did you make of that trade, and what did you make of that trade specifically in giving the Oilers a potential bottom?
So, yeah, I see it as a worthwhile bet for the Oilers, Matt. There's a guy who they're going to like the fact that he skates well. He's a fairly busy player, like willing to get involved in the forecheck, willing to be physical. The offensive production just has not been there for him. Like he doesn't finish enough chances. And ultimately that was probably a little bit of the difference maker for him in Vancouver. But from an Edmonton point of view, they're going to bank on the fact that if he finishes a little more and he's productive, they're getting the Holloway replacement for $1 million and not have to pay him 2.2. So I do think it's a worthwhile gamble. And for the Oilers, like they're probably a better team than they were last year, but they're definitely a slower team than they were last year. Like Holloway's out, McLeod is out. Say what you want about him, but he's very fast. Warren Fogle is out. And, it's guys like Adam Henrique and Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson. Like it's a half step slower. right? And I think that's that's something that's important, and Podkolzin is going to give them an element of speed. And you know what, for Vancouver, this regime is obviously not tied to him. They're not the ones that drafted him. You could make the argument that he wasn't given the most opportunity, along the way. I can listen to that. I cannot listen to that. I don't know. Like we're kind of splitting hairs when it comes to that.
Played a full season, Frank, at 20
Yeah.
years old and scored 14 goals, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But I think it's a worthwhile gamble for the Oilers and for Vancouver. I hate to say it, but like I don't think they're going to go into the season, or I don't think at any point in the season they're going to be talking about how much they miss him. So it was, I think to recoup an asset for him is fine. And I don't know if that's the guy that comes back to haunt you when you play a team that has McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, etc.
And Skinner.
Right.
hey, so what do you think of Edmonton not matching those offer sheets?
I can't say I'm surprised. I think they showed us once again that the number one thing that teams prioritize is cap space over prospects, over picks, over player development. Is the number one thing that you can weaponize and utilize in today's NHL is cap space. And you can have Evan Bouchard making a lot of money, which he's going to be very soon. You can have Darnell Nurse making 9.25, and you can have another defenseman who makes $4.6 million, but that other defenseman can't be someone you're not exactly sure of at this point. Like, it has to be a little more of a sure thing. And ultimately, Broberg was the seventh guy last year. He came in place of Vinny Desharnais, and he played great. You got to do it for a full 82. And you gotta stack seasons together, and then you got to do it in the playoffs. And he might turn into that, but today I'm not convinced he is that. And you can look at it this way: they've given themselves a little financial flexibility to now go out and get players that they really like, and not players that they got forced into taking at certain prices. So it's a shame for them, I guess, because those are guys that they've drafted, they've developed, and now they're ready to take the next step. And they're not going to do that in an Oiler uniform. They're going to do that in a St. Louis uniform. But outside of it being a shame, for the future, it doesn't, I don't think it moves the needle in a significant negative manner for the Oilers and their Stanley Cup aspirations this year. And ultimately that team is in win now mode. And they also have to keep in mind that they have a lot of money coming on the books where, Bouchard's going to have to get signed. Draisaitl's going to have to be signed. So I was not shocked, but you never know how much teams love their young prospects and how far they're willing to go. But in that case, they opted to not keep them.
How much do you think that's going to change? You mentioned cap space being so vital, and you obviously see the trade between Winnipeg and Pittsburgh the other day for two top prospects, each of their own. But how much do you think that we'll see guys now if the fit isn't there or things like that, or teams are going to be, willing to give up their prospects now to I guess try and improve for the shorter or longer term?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because I feel like in baseball, teams are willing to just get rid of prospects all the time. It's like we're in win now mode. This guy might be our fifth best or third best prospect, but we still don't know. Like, we still don't know if that guy's going to turn into anything. I feel like with hockey, you have a better understanding of which guys are like kind of your untouchables. Like if you go to Vancouver, when Quinn Hughes was coming up, when Elias Pettersson was you kind of know who the untouchables are, and you kind of know like who's your guy that you're willing to part with. With that being said, I feel like when the writing is on the wall for your team, in the sense that it's win now mode, and contracts are going to be coming up, and big pay raises are coming, and maybe there's guys that may or may not stay. Like, there, when you see that expiration date to the core group as it is, maybe getting closer, that's when you got to bring those prospects into consideration a little bit more, because you're almost in this desperation mode and you're throwing things at the wall, and it's like, it's now or never. Unless your team is in that now or never mode, I think you kind of still do owe it to, the scouts that drafted this guy, that drove around the continent watching him, and, owe it to the player to see if he can actually do something in your own organization. Right. But I think there's just things that happen organically where it brings you to a point where it's now or never. And I think those things are on the table more for those teams than other teams that are just, making a trade just for the sake of making a trade.
Lastly, Frank, Sammy Blais, who signs with Abbotsford and will go to Canucks camp on a professional tryout, a career high 25 points. That's not his game, but he is noticeable on the ice. Tell us about Sammy Blais.
I just think, he had the ACL injury a couple of years ago that held him back. I think it was the Subban slew foot, which was, I hate seeing the ACL, and it's always difficult to come back from that, but it's been a while now. And I think for him, his game is pretty simple. It's speed, it's finishing hits, it's lower in the lineup, and that's great. Like, I think, come into camp, do exactly that, and, leave your mark. And there's going to be, not that there's going to be opportunity right away, but you never know, like, who's going to go down and what kind of situation the team might be put in. So I think he knows the kind of player he is because he plays to that more often than not. And if there's a little more skill there, that's great. But it's fairly straightforward for him. It's lower in the lineup. It's speed. It's some physicality. It's forechecking. And I think the coach, as we've seen here over the last year, tends to like when a player knows exactly what he's all about and plays to that. So it's a low risk move for the Canucks because you're going to have the guy playing in the minors anyways. He's going to come to camp. He's going to show you what he has, and that's pretty much all you can ask for if you're a player in that situation where you haven't had anything yet, and it's August 23rd.
And who knows if they do have some injuries up front at camp, maybe he's the guy who ascends, much like Vasily Podkolzin was hoping to. Sounds like a talking player too. Great stuff, Frank. Thank you for your time here today, and we will catch up soon.
All right, fellas. Nice seeing you.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the net. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
There's some price from the historic Wall Center. Irf Gaffar is sitting in for Blake today, and will be sitting in for Quadrelli on Tuesday when Canucks Conversation fires back up. Joining us now, the co-host of said program, of course, Canucks beat writer for The Athletic, Mr. Harmon Dial. How you doing?
Doing great. It's unfortunate that the summer has the weather has kind of turned sour, but still enjoying things. And honestly, it's a sign that camp is around the corner, that Young Stars is around the corner, and that's always an exciting time.
Yeah, camp. Will Demko be on the ice doing anything in camp, Harm? What's your intel?
I don't know exactly what his timeline is. I would say the reporting that Rick had is, as far as there being no timeline, and now they're poking around the goalie market for these discussions to be happening late in August, I think is at least a little bit concerning, at least a little bit worrying. Not saying I'm hitting the panic button, but it creates certainly some level of uncertainty. But I think the one positive to keep in mind is, even if Demko is shelved and has to miss some regular season time, that at least the Canucks have gotten to the point as a team where they don't need everything to go right to be a playoff team, right? They can weather a short-term absence from Demko. They're a solid enough team defensively under Rick Tocchet. From the second half onward, they weren't just good defensively, they were elite. We're talking top 5 in the NHL in terms of 5-on-5 shot and chance suppression. So they can weather an absence. If there is an absence, we don't even know if there could be a scenario where maybe he misses some camp, but is ready to go for the start of the regular season. I think everybody's top priority right now when it came to this Demko news, the first thought is the team needs to make sure that he's healthy and at his best come playoff time, because that's when they'll need him at his best when you go up against the best teams in the Western Conference.
So let me ask you the poll. Does the season hinge on Thatcher Demko's health? It sounds like you don't think so.
I don't think so. It definitely makes things more challenging. But again, I think this team has gotten to the point where they defend well enough. They control 5-on-5 play well enough. Could it create some strain in the sense of now your blue line, for example, is going to need to do a much better job moving the puck. And when we were talking earlier in the summer about could they use another puck mover, that's going to be an area that is under increased focus because you want to spend less time defending in your own zone if you don't have Demko for some chunk of games. But ultimately, especially with some of the additions they made up front, I think they're hopefully going to be able to generate more offense as well. And if they can get the power play going on a more consistent basis, because yes, they were 11th in the NHL in the regular season, but we saw how lopsided it was in terms of first half, it was dominant. Second half, it was abysmal. I think they can weather the storm with a Demko injury. I think they're a good enough team.
When Demko was hurt last season before the playoffs or in the playoffs, and you know, everyone talked about him kind of wanting to come back and chomping at the bit to come back. And you know, if they made it to the third round, yeah, he would have played well. Probably not now that we know the news that we know now. But Harm, going into this season, the news that we know now, he's not 100%. Obviously, may not be a timetable. There could have been a procedure. No one's really going to confirm that right now. How much time would you give him to come back? I mean, is this where you have your biggest luxury right now? Is he's not ready for training camp? He's not ready for the first 3 weeks of the regular season. If he's not ready for the first month, can we go with Silovs to start and at least get us through the first little bit?
You have to take it as patiently as possible, because the worry would be if you start looking at, we don't want him to miss too many regular season games. Well, the worst thing to do at this point would be to rush it back.
Yeah.
And risk another injury. To me, you're going to have options as far as being able to slow play things and look at the waiver market even, right? A lot of us are talking about free agent targets right now and names like Kevin Lankinen and whatnot. But the luxury that the Canucks have right now is time, because we're in an interesting spot in the NHL where I think most teams need to be 3 quality goaltenders deep as far as guys that can actually step up and play in the NHL, just because the workhorse starter that plays 65 games is kind of a dying breed.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, because of roster and waiver rules, you can only carry 2 goalies on the roster. So there are going to be a lot of quality third string goalies on other NHL teams that could end up on waivers. So if you need a short-term veteran type of patch to pair with Silovs, then those types of names are going to be available later in camp and as preseason rolls around closer to the start of the regular season. And that's when if you're the Canucks, you're going to have the most intel on, okay, what exactly does Demko's timeline look like?
Do you know of any scenarios where a goalie may shake free on waivers, Harm, at the end of camp?
I haven't looked at specific scenarios around the league yet, but even go back to like last year, for example, there were certain teams that like we've gotten to the point where like Montreal had to carry 3 goaltenders on their roster for a long time. Like Calgary's had a lot of these goaltending question marks, and they had to bury Dustin Wolf in the minors just because he was waivers exempt. So I'm not certain on particular examples we could see for the start of this season, but you know that they're going to be out there for sure.
Yeah, Kochetkov, Anderson, and Ranta maybe in Carolina. If just a quick look. Okay, so tell me how you feel about Yuri Patera and potentially Kevin Lankinen.
I like Lankinen a lot. Now, the question mark with him is, can the Canucks sort of afford him cap-wise, and is the opportunity there, right? Because if I'm Kevin Lankinen, I've gone this deep into August without a contract. It's not just, hey, I'm coming off a $2 million salary, and I want something similar to that. It's, I want the best opportunity possible to play a lot of games and rebuild my value so that I can cash in next summer. And so to do that, you need to be certain that you're going to get a lot of rope. And so if I'm in Lankinen's position, the first thing I'd be wondering is, okay, I need some clarity on Demko's timeline, and if and when he comes back, what does that mean in terms of Arturs Silovs? Because if you really like Silovs, then what does that mean for my playing time when Demko comes back? So as much as I really like Lankinen and as great as his numbers were in Nashville last season, particularly his advanced analytics, I'm not sure if there's going to be a fit with the cap and ultimately with just the opportunity. Beyond that, with Patera, he's interesting. I think he's got an intriguing skill set. His AHL numbers weren't the best, but the thing to keep in mind is the Henderson Silver Knights were an awful team last year in the American League. And as we know, environment plays such a big role in a goalie save percentage. So Patera is going to be intriguing. I think he's going to be in the mix now in terms of trying to fight for a spot if Demko isn't ready for the start of a season. And having said that, though, I still think there could be goaltenders with more pedigree and with more experience, most importantly, that could land on waivers.
Ian Clark, are we not making? Is this a bigger deal than people might be making it out seem to be? I think it is, to be completely honest. Harm, when you look at it and look what he's done, I know that, obviously he can't be on the ice, but I think that the role that he wants and the role that he is now been given are two completely different things. What are your takes on Ian Clark right now?
It's raised my eyebrows for sure, because when he signed that extension, the whole idea was, okay, he's going to grow into this director of goaltending position. And this seems to be taking a bit of a step back. Also, just the timing of it. Again, late August. These are typically, as far as coaching staff changes and decisions, these are things that are typically handled at the end of the season, right? Very early in the offseason. So for the timing for this to happen in late August certainly raises eyebrows. And look, we know how revered Ian Clark is as a goaltending coach. He's elite. He is best in class. So it is certainly a hit for the Canucks to not have him on the ice. Of course, I think when Canucks fans first saw the news, it was okay, at least he's still in the organization, but you're not going to have the same level of impact if you're more of like a scouting type, for scouting and development type role, as opposed to being on the ice every day with these goaltenders. So it is something that raises my eyebrows, and I do wonder if there's more than just the explanation that we got from the team's release.
Yeah, because Rutherford was talking earlier in the summer about Demko having to change up his routine. Do you think that's related to what we heard here about Clark this week?
I don't know. I don't have intel on that. But again, there were just no whispers about it, right? Like I hadn't heard anything in the lead up to this offseason that Clark might be at a point where he's considering a lesser role or not being on the ice as consistently. It really caught me off surprise. It really, really caught me off surprise.
Yeah, no, I think he would have liked to continue in the director role.
Yeah.
And the Canucks said, no, if you can't get on the ice, you can't get on the ice. So back to you think you can hold the fort if Demko misses some time. What number of games would you be comfortable with Silovs playing, particularly since, we were talking about Silovs and maybe a 27, 30 game capacity anyways to help get Demko rested for the postseason? Yeah,
I think Silovs is interesting because we saw how electrifying he was in the playoffs. In pressure cooker situation, he steps up. We've seen how dominant he can be in other high leverage stretches like the World Championships for Latvia, where he was player of the tournament, I believe. But at the professional level, he hasn't for long stretches shown that he can play at a really consistent level. You go back to his performance in Abbotsford last year, he played pretty decently, but there were times when Nikita Tolopilo was also right there as far as the level that he was playing at. Silovs did have some dips in his play. And so because of that, I'd be careful about not putting too much on his plate. I definitely want to give him the ball, give him the, a 50% share of starts, 55% share of starts. But I'd be wary of assuming that just because he played well in the in the playoffs, that he's immediately going to take this job and that you can give him 60 to 70 to 80% of the starts and that he's going to have no hiccups, right? There are kinks in his game that he's going to have to iron out. I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is we saw both in the regular season and in the playoffs that at times tracking pucks through traffic from long distances can be a challenge. And this is where teams are going to do their pre-scouting homework, right? When Silovs first sort of arrived on the scene in the playoffs, there probably wasn't as much of a body of work for teams to see, okay, what are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? So he's young, he's raw, he's going to need time to adapt. I'm confident that he can play at a competent level at the NHL. But you're going to need to have contingency ideas and options in place just in case he does struggle at times, because he is young and he is still inexperienced.
Excuse me. I think when you look at Silovs as well, I'm pretty sure didn't he lose the starting job in Abbotsford at one point last season? And then there was a lot of talk about, the new goaltending coach and that coming in and all sorts of things like that. But I think for him, the biggest thing is he's going to play high level hockey here right away. So that's in short order with Latvia trying to qualify for the Olympics. So you have a guy that's now having that, and to go in and to be able to throw him in. We talked about the rest earlier of this. So are you comfortable with, Silovs making that start and being the guy in short order for the regular season?
Well, you may not have many other options,
Yeah.
right? And I do like how unflappable he is, right? Just covering him during the playoffs, being there on a day in, day out basis in the locker room, you can really tell that he's a happy-go-lucky character, that he doesn't let the pressure phase him. And this is even like having conversations with people around the organization. I remember when he was first called up, not last season, but the year before, and he was sort of immediately, I think his first game was against the Rangers, maybe, or it was a powerhouse NHL team. And a lot of us were thinking, wow, they didn't slow play him. This is a really young goaltender. Like, this is a big test for him. And the idea that kept coming back from people was he's not going to feel the pressure. It doesn't matter. He's fully capable of being thrust into a position that's uncomfortable, and he's going to rise to the occasion. It's not going to cripple him mentally. So that's at least a strength that I'm confident in, that, hey, there may be bumps along the road, but at least as far as being thrust into the spotlight potentially, that he's going to be able to remain cool, calm, and collected.
Moving on, the Vasily Podkolzin trade, Harm. What did you make of it, and what did you make of the fact it was with a division rival, the chief rival, Edmonton Oilers?
I'm not too surprised that they made the trade, just because logically they had about 15 forwards on that would have required waivers to get sent down, and 15 forwards, that NHL caliber ones that were looking to make the roster, they weren't going to be able to keep everyone. And when I looked at the other contenders for, let's say, the 13th or 14th forward positions, there were names like Phil DiGiuseppe, Nils Amon. We know that PDG is adored by Rick Tocchet as far as just being a low maintenance guy that Tocchet trusts defensively, that he likes his forechecking. There's a reason why PDG, as much as he's not an exciting player, that he's gotten occasional opportunities, even in the top six, ahead of some of the other wingers on the depth chart. And then with Nils Amon, it's the flexibility to be able to play center as well, contribute on the penalty kill. So I think this was a case of the Canucks sort of looking ahead, realizing that Podkolzin had an outside chance of making the roster, and that he would have required waivers and likely would have been claimed if he didn't make the team out of camp. And it was an opportunity for them to get ahead of the curve, get something back for him. And the other factor that in the context of all this goaltending news now that is interesting is it opens up another contract slot, because there were, I believe, 49 contracts, pretty close to the 50 contract limit before the trade. Now they've got a little bit more flexibility. And I will say the return is fine. I didn't expect him to have much value beyond the 4th round pick. I would have preferred that the Canucks found a way to send him somewhere other than Edmonton, just because you're helping out a divisional rival. But ultimately, it's the kind of trade that I look at and shrug as far as going, I can understand why they made the trade. The return is pretty modest. It doesn't really excite you, and would have preferred to send him a little bit further away than Edmonton.
Sammy Blais, what can he do for the organization?
Blais is interesting. He was a player that at one point in time, a lot of people looked at as, wow, this guy could be an intriguing top 9 power forward, just because he had that jam to him, that genuinely aggressive playing style, right? Because some guys have size, some guys even have work rate, but do they have that actual meanness? Do they have some actual power forward qualities? And That's what Blais used to be. He was one of the centerpieces for the Rangers as part of the Pavel Buchnevich trade. Injuries, unfortunately, have sort of derailed his ability to live up to that potential. I don't think he's ever going to get to the point where he's a top 9 power forward, but can he be a crash and bang fourth line winger for you in a pinch? Yeah, I think he can provide value in that type of role. And again, I think he's going to have a tough time making the team out of camp, just because after signing Sprong and after signing Sherwood, I like those players more than I like Sammy Blais, but he gives you an identity at the very least. And that's an element that when I look at the Canucks fourth line at times last season, when occasionally there would be, Ilya Mikheyev demoted down to the fourth line, or Nils Aman in that position, or even a Phil Giuseppe, it felt like, okay, the fourth line, if they aren't like what are they accomplishing, right? They're not going to hurt you, but are they giving you energy? Are they that good defensively? And that's where Sammy Blais, as far as midseason potentially being a guy that can step up if injuries strike, he's at least going to give you some level of identity, if nothing else.
Is Daniel Sprong, final one for me, is Daniel Sprong going to start this season on Elias Pettersson's wing?
I think he should get a shot there in training camp. I think it's between him and Höglander. I think both guys should get a fair opportunity, especially if Pettersson and DeBrusk are a duo. Well, both of those guys are above average defensively, which means that Sprong, we know that he is flawed defensively, that he is inconsistent in that area. But if you've got two guys in DeBrusk and Pettersson that can really drive the bus, and Sprong doesn't have to do much from a two-way perspective, that could be a really intriguing fit, especially because Höglander's game, we already know that he can crush it in a fourth line role if it came to that, right? Because first half of the season, it wasn't until the All-Star break that Höglander got a consistent top 6 opportunity. Whereas with Sprong, as far as lineup fit, we know that in the past he's been productive in a bottom 6 role. But as far as, again, if you want to build out a specific identity for your fourth line, maybe Höglander's more of a plug-and-play option as far as the speed and the forechecking. But in having said that, Sprong's going to have to earn it, because I don't want to discount the success that Höglander had. I mean, scoring 24 goals is no joke, and Höglander's still young enough that he could take another step as far as earning more two-way trust, shoring up other parts of his game from a defensive standpoint. Sprong and Höglander are the two most intriguing options to me as far as potentially being that other winger to play with Elias Pettersson.
All right, now you guys get up to tons of mischief Tuesday while Quadrelli's away. Okay,
absolutely.
On conversation. Harmon, thank you very much for the time, my friends. Best of luck, and we'll catch up down the road.
Thanks, guys.